About a year ago, I was invited to a very special little private event down in Nolensville, Tennessee, where everyone was allowed to bring whatever they could to barter and exchange without the use of money. So I loaded up a few little survival items that I knew I had on hand and went not knowing what to expect. And boy, was I in for a treasure. If you ever get invited to a bartering day, go. And if you don't hear of one in your area, you might need to be the one to organize it. What an excellent practice for the future, where in case you weren't able to exchange money, you were able to barter and trade. So, for a couple of my survival bracelets, I had a wonderful couple, bless me with a couple of plants of lamb's quarters. And little did I know what a treasure I had until I came home and did some research. So stay with us in the next few minutes. I can't wait to share just what I found out about it and how wonderful this plant has become to my garden. Out here next to my little camper, I have this red wagon filled with some of my favorite herbs that I keep on hand at all times. And right here I've got my sweet mint, which is fantastic for so many things. Then there's the stevia that's wonderful for sweetening teas and coffees and everything like that naturally. But over here I have my lamb's quarters, and this is left over from last year. I want to tell you just a little bit about what fascinated me about this plant and how many good benefits it might have for you to consider. First of all, it's a very old plant. It grows in almost every continent of the world, and it's kind of funny, the starting point of it, nobody really knows. Of course, a lot of different people claim responsibility for it. They think it originated in Asia and then went over into Europe and then came over to the US back in the 16th century, but then they found very good evidence that the Blackfoot Indians had plenty of uses for lamb's quarters going on way back in the 16th century already. So it was probably already spread all over the world at that time. You'll find it so many different places, along riverbeds, in fields, along tree lines. Anywhere that you disturb the soil, like for your garden, is a great place for this to grow. And it grows very well, and it is prolific in that it likes to multiply. So you want to be careful if you've let it grow in your garden, even though it makes a fantastic fertilizer like comfrey, for your garden. You might want to be careful and make sure that you've harvested it before it starts seeding, because it actually, one single plant of lamb's quarters can seed up to 75,000 seeds in 1 year. So even though this is an annual plant, it has so many seeds that fall from it usually. If you just let it grow wild, it's going to have plenty come up the next year and the next year with no issues at all. All right, so I've told you a few things there. Let me go back now to originally what it was called was lamb's quarters. We don't know exactly why, but it means, the ancient meaning of it was all good, because of it having so many benefits health-wise for eating. But it's also known by some other things like pigweed or goose feet, and that's because it looks a lot like a goose foot, the shape of the leaves. But pigweed, goose feet, fat hen, or bacon weed, I don't know for sure who all named it these things or where they came up with them, but you'll hear it named a lot of different things depending on where you are in the world. It is of the Aramanth family, so it's, if I say it correctly, let me look down at my notes. I think it's an Aramanthaceous chenopod is what it would be, because it is part of that family, and it is all of it edible. However, the stems are kind of pithy and not really great. What you see here is about the perfect time of year to harvest it, because it hasn't gone to seed, and it is about, I would say this plant right here is maybe 2.5 feet tall. It can grow up to 3 or 4 or 5, even 5 feet tall, but that's very unusual. Usually it's going to stay right around the 2 to 3 feet tall wherever you are. And that also translates to somewhere between 1 and 2 meters tall at the highest that it's going to grow. Now, the leaves are kind of unique. They are generally blue-green from a distance, or just a little bit, have this nice silvery look that you can probably see from where you are, and that's the underneath side of each of the leaves has this wonderful coating of a little white powder, and it's actually waterproof. So if I poured water on it, that powder would just kind of repel the water right off. That is something that's not really exciting to eat, but it cooks right off, and you don't even need to worry about washing that off necessarily to try and get all that powder off. When it cooks out and it's just fine. But it has this wonderful little silvery side to the leaves. The leaves, like I told you before, have this unique shape, which is sort of like a goose foot. When I first heard it, I thought, now how exactly is that? But I guess it could kind of look like webbed toes of a goose or something. You'll often see it in kind of a diamond shape, but then as the leaves developed, they get kind of this wonderful little triangulated edge, sawtooth edge on the sides. It's not spiky at all. It's very soft against your hands. And there you have it. That's an easy way to identify it. It's kind of a unique looking plant when you get up close to it. I love that it's edible right while it is raw, just like this. You can eat it right off the plant, and it has a very, very pleasant taste to it. It tastes very much just like spinach. There's no bitterness. It has a nice flavor to it, so I don't feel like I'm just eating grass. No bitterness at all. I have heard that late in the year, when it gets really, really big and kind of overgrown and has gone to seed, there might be a little bit of bitterness in the leaves then. So you don't want to eat a whole lot of the raw leaves, even though they taste great, because it has some oxalic acid, just like spinach has in it. And spinach, you just don't want to eat a huge amount of it raw, but you would be just fine eating a whole salad of spinach without worrying about too much oxalic acid. And that's really the same for this. There's just that small warning that, hey, don't gorge yourself and overdo it, or you might get quite a bit of the oxalic acid in your system. I would also say the seeds are totally edible. They're kind of a white, when it goes to seed, it makes these wonderful little white, round, but kind of flat, round clusters of the seeds. And they're entirely edible, but they also have the saponins in them. And so you don't want to eat a huge quantity of the seeds just raw right off the plant because of that. Now, I don't know the exact amount, so don't quiz me on exactly how many you can eat before it's too many. They just kind of give us this blanket warning that says don't overdo it with just massive quantities of that. All right. Now, the good thing is that any of the oxalic acid that's in it, and even the saponins, they kind of just cook out with no issues once you stick this in the frying pan. And there are so many recipes that are recorded. You can Google it and find some for yourself. But I have found recipes where this is used in everything from making your own homemade crackers. You could make pesto with it. You can use it in any recipe that you would use spinach in. You can make fresh salads of just using it raw. You can even roast it or do it like you make those kale chips, where you just put it under the broiler and turn it into chips with some wonderful seasoning on it. It has limitless possibilities, so I want you to go wild with a little Googling and see all the different recipes that are available. I might post below this video a few of my favorites that I've found in different places online. Lastly, let me tell you about the nutrition content of it, because it has a chock full amount of nutrition that's going to be great for you if you're out in the wild. So just 1 cup of just picking the leaves is going to give you about 80 milligrams of vitamin C. It's going to give you 309 milligrams of calcium and about 11,600 IUs of vitamin A. It's also very rich in thiamine and riboflavin and niacin and iron. This is a plant that you should know about. Now, some people plant it in their garden, but like I mentioned earlier, if you do that, you just might want to make sure that you go ahead and pinch off the top of it before it goes to seed, or harvest it and eat it before it goes to seed, because you will find it starts proliferating and multiplying around that garden, and it really can take over super fast if you let it. That's kind of why I like keeping it contained in this one little spot, so that I have a little more control over it, but it grows great next to the rest of my herbs. Lastly, let me give you just a couple of things. Remember not to pick anything that you forage from somewhere that pesticides have been sprayed in the last year or two. And you don't really want to do anything that might be like in a manure pile where maybe some pathogens have been absorbed. Not every plant absorbs them, but this happens to be one, and there are many others like it that are known to absorb just anything ever so gently put into that soil. So you don't want anything it could be exposed to that you would then ingest yourself. Secondly, let me say this, do your own research. I am not a doctor or a professional forager that can absolutely tell you every single thing you need to know. So learn them yourself. Take a class from someone who can walk you through the woods, and you can pick some right on that walk and taste it for yourself, feel of it, learn everything about that plant so you know that you're the expert when you go out foraging. And just one easy little trick that I've learned with this particular plant is if I think I have gotten some lamb's quarters, but I'm not sure, if I pick one of the leaves and I crush it up and smell of it, if it smells like turpentine, that's not the same thing. And there is a kind of a similar looking plant that's going to smell a little bit like turpentine. Throw it out if that's the case. But if it has this nice, sweet, green, grassy, or spinachy type smell, you should be good to go if that's the determining factor that you need to try last to make sure you've got the right thing. All right. If you don't mind, I would love to ask you to hit that subscribe button, and YouTube has it now so that you need to also hit the bell after you've hit subscribe. It's kind of their new way of making sure that you want to be notified when we post new videos, and that'll help us a lot. All right, before you go, let me bless you and say have a great week ahead, and go out and intentionally make it your priority to be a blessing to someone today. Before you go, I have to share this out of 1 John chapter 4, and it's verses 9 and 10. It says this, "In this the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent His only Son into the world, so that we might live through Him. In this is love, not that we have loved God, but that He first loved us and sent His Son as a payment for our sins." Now go spread the word.